What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Our MMA show, a special episode. It's a Black Friday edition because if you just listen to Jimmy's commentary, you get this for free. And even though there was no charge for Jimmy's commentary, it's, it is what it is.
Still special.
It is special because you know what it represents, Jimmy? It represents a change in our culture because I listened to what you had to say. And granted, I don't know that I could cover a tactical fight much better than you did. But one of the things that you didn't talk a lot about that interests me is outside of the actual fight and the way some of these things have kind of fallen into place. Because I'm one of the ones that believe this is a really, really bad idea for Conor McGregor. I think when we look at our MMA bubble, like, the one that you and I live in practically,
right?
I think we lose sense of global recognition. And I offer that to you because I don't think Cowboy Cerrone is a big name. Now, I know a lot of MMA fans will balk at that, and I'm an MMA purist. Listen, man, I've been to a lot of Cowboy fights. Cowboy was one of the first fights I drove like 7 hours to get to. Cowboy versus Cowboy, as a matter of fact.
That was a good one.
It was a great one. I love Cowboy Cerrone, one of my all-time favorites. Maybe a little insider information here, but a guy that does not have to fight. He wanted to be a fighter. He didn't need to be a fighter. He doesn't need the money. He didn't need the money before. And it's very ironic, such a clash of two names. And one of the first things that I thought of was, if Conor McGregor loses to Cowboy Cerrone, how many people do you think are going to say, who is Cowboy Cerrone outside of the U.S.?
I think he has. Okay, here's the contrast, and I went into this in my YouTube video because there are a few criteria that have to be met. Right? It's got to be a big name. It's got to be put him in title contention, even if it's an outside title contention. You get what I'm saying, and it has to be a standalone pay-per-view. Those are three criteria you have to hit. The problem is that all the names around Cowboy Cerrone are murderers. Justin Gaethje hits like you stole something from him, right? Tony Ferguson, no way. Khabib, no way. A re-energized Dustin Poirier, maybe. That would be my number 2, right? Then you get into guys who are tough but have less name value than Donald Cerrone. Paul Felder, Dan Hooker, Kevin Lee, right? Those are all very tough fighters that don't have Donald Cerrone's name value. Donald Cerrone is the only one that kind of hits all the categories and is a winnable fight for Conor McGregor. Meaning, there are people who will make more money, might be a bigger splash. Ferguson, Khabib, Gaethje, maybe. But I don't see him beating those guys. Definitely at 170. 170 is full of guys, I think, who beat Conor McGregor. Tyron Woodley, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, Leon Edwards, Dos Anjos. I don't think he wants any of those guys. They're just too tough. Maybe Masvidal. So my statement is, with the criteria you have to meet, you have to check off a lot of boxes for a Conor McGregor fight. Cowboy's the only one that checks all of them off, who's a relatively safe fight. Now, I'm not saying he wins. I'm saying he doesn't beat Ferguson. He doesn't beat Khabib, right? I think he has a much tougher time with Justin Gaethje. So, Cerrone's beatable, yet has a lot of name value, and fans really like him. And that combination makes him the best choice right now.
If you look at Conor on paper, this is a guy that's really only won 2 of his last 4. I think we can agree the last fight was incredibly exposing. His most recent win is over a guy that went 2-2-1 and is no longer in the UFC by choice. I just don't know if, when you look at things in that context, Conor McGregor has the star power now that he did before the loss to Khabib, and if this is going to do anything to re-energize that. I get that, I also think you've got, again, another pay-per-view here with no true belt, which is not something that I want to continue to see happen. However, all things considered, I understand what you're saying as far as what we see, what we perceive Cowboy as. I think the downside is a loss to Cowboy Cerrone is
crippling.
Yeah.
No.
We
totally agree on that one. Yeah, for sure.
But what does it do for Cowboy? I mean, listen, there's no fair way to say this. Generally speaking, this guy has had a lot of opportunities to go out win titles, win big fights. And for whatever reason, as you mentioned in your video as well, it just hasn't worked out. So it's ironic to me that as you describe this to me, it's almost like we're handcrafting a fight where Conor has the best chance to win.
Yes.
And has he earned that right? Or is that just something we have to do to protect the pony at this point?
Hey, you protect the cash cow as much as humanly possible. Meaning you could give him some scrub that he easily beats up, but that's not a pay-per-view seller. That doesn't satisfy his sense of the grandiose. It doesn't stroke his ego fighting some dude you've never heard of. So, like I said, it's just there's so many 3 or 4 checkboxes you need. And is it a setup fight as much as possible? Yes. You have to accommodate the celebrity. You have to accommodate Conor McGregor to some degree, but you have to keep him relevant and he has to win. That combination isn't easy at all. And I agree with you. I think a loss to Cowboy Cerrone is devastating. Then you got to take him out of that even contender status. And once you're out of that at 55 and 70, who have the 2 weight classes that have been historically extremely strong in UFC, I think they're 2 of the strongest right now. Where do you go from there? Because it doesn't get easier. It just gets harder.
Do you feel that the perception of how people reacted to this fight was less than what you expect? And I mean, listen, 4 or 5 years ago, any Conor McGregor news is major news. Everyone talks about it. And I think within going back to that bubble that we live in, a lot of us knew, for all the reasons you and I have already discussed, this is really one of the very, very few fights that made sense. But I feel like the social media explosion just wasn't there for this anymore.
I think it's bigger like a year and a half ago when they were first talking about it. You know what I mean? I when this first came around, am I right? It's about a year and a half ago. They were talking about him versus Cowboy, and then Dana came out and said, no way, we're not doing it. I think it was bigger then. I really do. I mean, Cowboys lost 2 in a row. Conor's been off for a long time. I think it made more sense about a year ago. And the delay doesn't help. It makes it maybe a more winnable fight for Conor because he's coming off 2 losses in a row. But I think it's one of those things. When you say, what does this do for Cowboy? I mean, what's Cowboy fighting for right now? Money. Now, that's not an insult. I'm saying, and you just said it, he's had enough opportunities to get title shots. He's never really gotten over that hump, right? And the one time he did get a title shot, he got blown out of the water by RDA. So what's he fighting for now? Money. What's he fighting for? Because he loves fighting. Okay, he gets a big fight for a lot of money. And what else is he fighting for? So that whole looking down the road, what does this do for Cowboy? Well, he fights again and makes money. That's what he does. I think he enjoys it. But the enthusiasm, I think you're correct. I think they waited a little too long to make this fight happen. I think it has more impact a year and a half ago. And now it's just a matter of, look, Conor's got to get in there. We want to make money off of him, keep him relevant. This is the way it works out. Yeah, fans will enjoy it. I think it will sell well, but I think there's more enthusiasm quite a while ago.
I'm not saying it's not a fun fight. It absolutely is a fun fight, but I struggle to find the context of how it stays relevant. And it's intriguing that you say, a year and a half ago, Dana literally kind of, poo-pooed this whole idea. I mentioned that to you because, a lot of the sound clips that we go back from that press conference, which I think was at this point 2 or 3 years ago, where, Cowboy and Conor got into it. When that happened, not one person was clamoring for that fight because it seemed so unachievable. You had, this seemingly megastar in the, midst of his upper, streak to stardom versus, a guy that, with all due respect, has just kind of been viewed as a journeyman that's done a lot for the sport, but really there was nothing drawing them together aside from, the fact they were also in different weight classes at the time. I just find it very odd that all of a sudden everyone is now seemingly on board with this fight, when literally twice over the past 3 years, no one would have looked at this as viable. It was just too much of a difference in marquee value in their names.
Yeah. Yeah, but what we're getting now, though, is there's more marquee value now for Cowboy. I mean, he's fans really love him. I call him basically almost an MMA Arturo Gatti. You know what I mean? Just goes to war. We really appreciate him. We love him. But there's also the flaws that kind of held him back have become cemented in our minds. He's not seen as a contender like he was maybe a year ago. He was not seen as a guy who, might be the champ. Like, we know how far he's going to get. He just stumbles when it comes to the big fights that are title eliminators and stuff like that. He's never overcome those humps. So for us as fans, we love him. He has a great name. He's always exciting, but he just never got over the top when it came to elite status. So those flaws have also become more solidified in our minds over his last couple of fights.
You know who I love fighting? You know who doesn't have a lot of flaws? You know who's exciting?
I can't wait to hear this.
Go ahead. You know this fight. You know this guy, Justin Gaethje.
100%. 100%. Love him.
Can you explain to me Conor McGregor, like the man of all men, right? The guy that once went down and carried the MMA flag into boxing, right? How in the world he would look past Justin Gaethje, who's called him out for a very, very long time, who you essentially acknowledge, I know, is the tougher fight.
Yes.
And instead goes to the guy that Gaethje just beat, and then seemingly, by your admission, and unfortunately by mine, would probably jump past him if he were to beat Conor in line, trying to get back to a title that we've pretty much said neither of these guys has a true distinct shot at. If really we look at it that way, you're essentially allowing me to say that Conor McGregor would rather fight a losing side, B-side Cowboy Cerrone versus an A-side Justin Gaethje. That's never what I've known Conor McGregor to be standing for.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Now let's say you're the UFC. All right, put on your Dana White hat. Shave your head, okay? Do you let, for strictly business reasons, Conor McGregor anywhere near an octagon with Justin Gaethje? You just want to make money.
Here's the thing: if I was Dana White, I wouldn't let Conor back into an octagon. First of all, you've already literally seen him get exposed by your champion, one of the greatest champions that could expose him. But you've literally watched that diminish his value. After that, you've watched a guy that's had an absolute ton of personal issues. Okay, the last thing we need right now as a sport is more people tarnishing the great athletes that are already here. And I say that as somebody that used to be a very big fan of Conor McGregor and loved a lot of what he does, but I can't look past the things that he's done. A lot of what he's done goes beyond just, hey, that's a mistake, that's something I can look past, and have really went right down to downright, you can't justify him as a fan. Even if I were to look past it, I can't justify him beating up an old guy in a bar. I could, and I'll probably catch flack for this, I could almost justify the Dolly incident. Not exactly how it played out, but we've all been there where you have to defend somebody. You know, you've got a friend that got beat up and you're going to go make it right. Now, do you always make it right by blowing out somebody's window trying to get into a tour bus? Not really. But we've all had those moments where we've lost composure trying to defend someone we cared about, right? And Artemis is boy. Like, I get it. I really do get that. But some of the other stuff, you just can't get past. And it's not the Conor McGregor Fighting Company. It's the Ultimate Fighting Championship. How much can you really go in and try to manipulate things in favor of a person that, by the way, like we just talked about, when it was up to actually defending the sport, failed? He got beat in boxing by Floyd Mayweather, who he announced the whole time would never stand a chance. Like, I will say, he's done a lot of great things. But the fact that he's never defended a belt, and the fact that all the personal things aside, he's really became more of a tarnish to MMA, at least in my opinion, as an MMA purist, than he has as a positive.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm saying in a completely mercenary sense. You don't make money off Conor McGregor if he's not fighting. You don't. He's an asset. He has value. How do you get the most out of that asset? The least you get out of him is Justin Gaethje walks through a few of his punches, throws a right hand or a left hand, and drills him into next week. I'm not saying that's happened. I'm not saying that's exactly how it goes down. Who knows how it would go down? But Justin Gaethje wouldn't just beat him, right? That was a mauling by Khabib, but it was, he got caught in a choke and he tapped, and that's the way it goes. Gaethje lays your ass out. And there's no worse visual for a fighter, especially somebody you're building up with the value of Conor McGregor, than eyes wide shut, looking at the ceiling at nothing. And if he loses to Justin Gaethje, that's how he would lose. And that's a visual that right now the UFC cannot afford. We want more value out of this guy. There are maybe, thinking ahead, 2 more big fights for him after Cowboy. And then after that, who knows if he has anything left in the tank. But they want that money. The best analogy I can think of is I read once sometime an expert on the oil companies, Exxon and Mobil, and they need to switch energy sources. They need to go to renewable energy sources, but they won't. And I remember somebody told me, who was an expert in the field, he said, because there's X number of trillions of dollars of oil left, and they want every drop of it. After that, they'll switch. But they want all that oil, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. That's an asset with value. We want it. We want to sell it. That is Conor McGregor. Of course, they're going to have to move on from Conor McGregor at some point. But while he has any value as a fighter and as an asset and as a commodity, we want to leech all we can out of it. And that means a win over Cowboy. Now, who knows if he gets it, but that's what they would like. A win over Cowboy, a fight with Masvidal, which would be huge. And then maybe he gets a shot at Khabib or whoever is champion. And then win or lose, that would probably be it. But they want those fights that make big money. And the best path to them, the first step, is a fight with Cowboy Cerrone.
Let me ask you, set aside all the variables here. The weight, who's going to be in his corner, because I haven't read a lot about Kavanaugh. I know Owen Roddy said he would be going past any excuse that could be there. Can you not make a really distinct comparison between what would be the end of Ronda Rousey in the UFC and if Conor loses this fight, almost a very similar path to Conor being out of the UFC in not only just hard losses, right, but losses that they couldn't come back from? Let's say he loses. Do you feel like this is the end based on everything we've talked about?
If he loses in Amanda Nunes, Ronda Rousey fashion, yes. And you got to remember the one thing about Ronda Rousey that always stands out to me is once she lost a round, she never won another one. Right? Once the nose went down on the plane, it never went up again. This is a guy who, despite he lost to Diaz, came back and beat Diaz. Now, a lot of people think he didn't win that fight, but you get my point. He's had setbacks before. Now, the difference is if it's one of those violent shellackings. And remember, Ronda Rousey, the last 2 fights she had, she got shellacked. Eyes wide shut, she just got outstruck. Head kick flattened her, and then Nunes was using her as target practice. She didn't just lose, she got blown away. She was outclassed. Now, Conor was outclassed on the ground against Khabib and also on the feet, but it didn't lead to that moment, that scary moment where he was just a punching bag with legs. That has yet to happen. If Cowboy can make that happen, that might be the end for Conor.
Well, we will see, but we will see on another pay-per-view with no championship associated to it, which
bums you.
It does. It does bum me because you know what? At the other side of this is not something that traditionally happened before, and now all of a sudden that we're in the ESPN era, it seems like we're just going into a direction where we're going away from competition in athletics, and we're going into how do we save the show pony? How do we create the best entertainment? And I guess maybe part of it is learning that as soon as all these corporate entities came in, we were really switching away from fighting and we were going into more an entertainment path. And I guess when you talk about Conor McGregor, you are ultimately talking about entertainment.
That's what he's great at. That's what he's great at. And I think this fight will sell well. It'll be entertaining as two guys stylistically. I think it's a good matchup. It'll be a lot of fun. And people will get to either, it's said all the time, love me, hate me, don't ignore me. People will love or hate Conor McGregor, and Cowboy Cerrone is an easy guy to root for. It's a nice foil, and I like it.
I agree. I can agree with that. I do like fun fights. I just don't like paying that much for them. So, MMA gods, we are at your mercy once again. We hope that you put through this event. With that said, we appreciate you guys spending a little bit of your holiday with us. We hope, as we mentioned on the podcast, you guys had a great holiday. You continue to have a great weekend, and we will be back on Monday with another edition of the podcast.